Hi, Patience. Hi, Deborah, Tinotinda, Anna. Something. How are you? We are just waiting for other people to join. But whilst we wait for other people to join, if you can also type in chat where you're watching from, in which country are you watching from, and any other things that you'd want also to learn from today. And then the other thing is we have sent the poll for questions. If you can also confirm if you've managed to receive that. If you didn't, that's fine. You can use the chat to ask the questions. So we're gonna give other people like up to 5 past and then we can start. They can always join us. If you can also share your video, guys, that will be fantastic. If you are comfortable, please share your video and just make sure you unmute yourself. You mute yourself actually. Hi everyone, to those who have just joined, if you can share your video as well, that is if you are comfortable. And then if you can also type in chat where you're watching from. It's always good to know that we actually like a wider community joining together different places, but with some commonalities in terms of the challenges that we experience as professionals. And surprisingly, we have like common grounds in terms of our professional career. So if you can type where you are watching us from, and then we are starting at 5 past. Sam, just let me know when you're ready for us to start.
Okay. Give me, perfect. Oh, wow. We've got somebody from Washington and we've got somebody from Kent. I'm in Sussex by the coast. It's a good spread.
Yeah, it's a good spread.
Right, I'm going to share my screen shortly and we're going to start. So I hope everybody on the call is as excited as I am about this session today. It's a much needed session and it's a much needed discussion just amongst us as professionals. So I think there's different layers that we can look at this, but between our people on the panel, Tendai Rukarwa and Tendai Bwanya, they will talk us through coaching from stuck to strong. So I'm going to start with a couple of housekeeping items. If you're able to keep your cameras on if possible, otherwise don't worry about it. We've got the, you'll be able to see the people that are talking. We've got Brenda Neshiri, who will be the moderator. She's part of the Weekend UK chapter committee. We've got Tendai Rukarwa and Tendai Bwanya. They're all going to introduce themselves shortly. I'm Sam Sango. I'm the chair of the UK Weekend chapter. And I'm just going to do an intro and hand over shortly. Please, can you mute your microphones? We'll be having polls as we go. And one thing I'm going to ask is, as we go through the session, if you've got any questions that you want answered at the end, please start putting them in the Q&A. Bertha, who's kindly set up this webinar for us and has also set up all this, will ensures that at least when we get to the end, we get the questions that people are keen to get answered, prioritized. The session is also being recorded, so you're aware. And as mentioned, we are going to have poll questions as we go through. On that note, Brenda, I'm going to hand over back to you and looking forward to the session.
Thank you so much, Sam, for start the session. So we're just gonna run through what we are going to cover today. Like what Sam has said, today we have Tendai Anna and then Tendai Bwanya who are going to take us through the session. And can you go on the next slide, Sam? Okay, so I'm gonna give 1 minute to Tendai Anna to introduce yourself. And then I'm also going to give 1 minute to Tendai Bwanya to introduce yourself. Tendai Anna, do you want to start?
Yes, please. So yes, my name is Tendai Anna Rukarwa, a fellow chartered accountant trained at EY in Zimbabwe before moving on to the UK. I've taken up various roles, but I think the one role that has stuck the most is one that has earned me the name, the Penguin Speaker. This is a name I have earned from using penguin analogies to share strategies for how corporates and professionals can live vibrant and fulfilling lives.
Thank you. Fantastic. Tendai Bwanya.
Thanks, Brenda. I'm glad to be here, actually. I've been on these ICAS events a few times, so people might know me, might not know me, but I'm Tendai Bwanya. And I started my career with Deloitte, where I spent maybe more than 75% of my career, but I also worked in industry, especially in the UK. My background is investment management and private equity. That's where I've spent the past 20 years. I was a partner at Deloitte until December last year. And at the moment, I'm really focused on personal things, personal investments, coaching, and also what I'm calling building the future. If anyone wants to hear about that, you can speak to me later on, but that's what I'm using my time for this year.
Thank you. That being said, so in terms of how the session is going to run, we are going to cover 4 key areas today. The first one that we are going to cover is how to recognize that you're actually stuck in building the confidence to ask for help. The second session that we'll cover is how we can actually engage with mentors, turning challenges into opportunities. And then we'll also learn from real stories, like from one of us, and then also from Tendai and Tendai. And then finally, we'll leave with practical actions. We'll also have a time for Q&A and just wrapping up the session. So today's session, maybe the one thing that I just want to emphasize is today's session is not just about asking how, it's about understanding that growth often happens and starts with a conversation. And sometimes it's not that we are just stuck. Sometimes even if we are doing well, a conversation can even help us like to get faster and more efficiently in terms of the things that we want. So before maybe we get into the details of the session, I just want us to start to check in with ourselves. So we're gonna put just an icebreaker to try and ease it up, because I've noticed like when I said, can we type in the chat, like few people type, but it's actually fantastic to hear that like we have people from different places. So today, if your next step in your career was a weather forecast, what would it be? You can type in the chat. You can either type the emoji like for sun, that means it's clear. You can either type partly, cloud. You can either type like the clouds you can type rain, or you can type storm. So either an emoji or the word. Can you type in chat? Or even the word. Springtime, fantastic. Okay. So thank you for your honesty, even for those answers that you guys didn't put in the chat. I know one way or the other, we know what's the answer for us. And one of the things that you recognize from this is not about like, this is the correct answer. It's about being honesty, is that to actually recognize that we experience like different seasons, even if we are in the same professions. In that way, the focus, one of the things that I wanted to then ask is that whatever the weather focus that you are in, how often do you ask for help compared to how you actually struggle silently? So we are going to have a poll. So that weather focus that you have, whether it's clear, whether it's partly, whether it's cloudy, rainy, storm, how often do you ask for help compared to how often you just struggle silently? Can we have the poll for that? Partly cloudy, perfect. Yeah, it does not have to be a right or wrong answer, like every answer is correct.
Bertha, are you on the call? If you can launch the poll, please. Thank you.
Just to understand, like whatever the weather focus that you are in, how often do you ask for help? Can we see the results? Let's find out. Let's see the results.
Can everybody on the call see the poll, the questions coming through?
Or you can even type if you cannot see the questions coming through. You can just type in the chat. Or it's just delayed. Okay, perfect. Let's see the results. Okay, perfect. Can we see the results? Are you able to view so that we can see like how many people said I asked for help immediately, and then how many people said I tried a bit on my own? But anyways, that's fine. So this was just try and get also the feel of the room in terms of it's actually interesting to know that some people, they are saying they ask for help quickly, and some people they struggle, which is fine. Like I said, it's not about getting, there's no right or wrong answer, and that is going to take us to the next presenter, because what we are going to then see is recognizing that you are stuck is actually one of the powerful forms of self-awareness. So that being said, I'm going to bring in Tendai to help us with how we can actually realize that I'm stuck, how you can actually realize that you need help, and how you can actually build that confidence to then go and ask.
Brenda, sorry,
So
I
Tendai,
just see that there seem to be results which I was not seeing. So maybe it's helpful to just
yeah, I wasn't
look at
also
them.
seeing the results. Let's see the results again.
Can you guys see the results? I've tried to put them on screen, but I don't know whether you
Yeah.
can see. Okay,
We
perfect.
can see them now. Thanks.
Yeah. So how
Okay.
often do you ask for help? 80% respond with, I try to muddle on my own a bit before I ask. And then 20% I'm wary of asking for help, and usually do so when it becomes critical.
Okay, it's actually interesting to know that people actually know that they need to ask for help, but just that for some reasons we are delaying to ask for that help. And this session is then going to help us to see how we can maybe accelerate the asking before maybe it becomes a delay. So Tendai, I want you to help us. As you can see that we already have people who understand that they need to ask. But now the question is, so who is holding us back? And one of the things that I want you to cover is that, can you share a moment maybe, because when I was looking at your profile, Tendai, I can see that you are a board member, you have 10 years experience in audit, you are a non-executive director, you are also a Penguin speaker. Have you ever had a moment where you realize, no, I'm actually stuck? Or what actually helped you to recognize it? Was it someone? And then if it was someone, or if it was you, what were some of the signs or behaviors that you actually notice in yourself? Because I'd like to believe that some of us, the reason why we struggle and then ask later is that maybe we actually don't realize till it's very late.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Brenda. And I like what you did where you talked about the profile, because a lot of the times we see the end result, but there's been a whole lot of processing and pruning that has happened in the background. So one story it comes to mind for me. I was in an audit firm. I was feeling overlooked and feeling as if my contribution was not being recognized. So I just wanted out. The frustration was so much for me. I just needed to be out, to be anywhere. So I was throwing my CV everywhere. Job titles, I wasn't looking. I just wanted to be out. And for sure, some people asked me to come in for an interview, and they actually gave me a job in the interview. And I was like, oh, finally, the relief, I'm just going to go out. One thing I didn't realize is that whilst I was going into that organization, there was a mass exodus out of the organization. So I got into that organization not having also factored I was joining at the beginning of March, peak audit season, I have to be answerable for audit results. I have no support. I had walked into a sinking ship when I thought I was running away from something that was sinking. So the shame I felt for, I had come up with an escape plan and walked into something that even seemed worse for me. I was struggling. I would go home and I just would sink in my own emotions. I reached out to one of my former seniors I'd worked with at EY in Zimbabwe, and I just poured out and just said, I think at this point, it's a one-way street. They're either going to just fire me or this company just has to burn down. I was very honest about where I was. I would have wanted to paint a picture of, I escaped, oh my goodness, next, but it was horrible. And to my surprise, she actually even mentioned that she had recently been promoted and they were going to put out a job description for the role that she had. And having seen my work before from working together, she thought it would be good for me to even come and work with her and she'd be happy to have me on her team. So I got a referral interview. So the referral interview the job wasn't even posted. I went straight for the interviews based on her referral, and I got to work with her when she was actually my boss. And that's how I managed to actually save my job titles on my CV and get back into a working environment where I could actually see myself moving and succeeding. And this is a fellow Zimbabwean, not a native, but it's someone I'd worked with before. So yeah, that was a sticky situation I managed to get out of when I was stuck.
Okay, so there's something that is interesting in your story, Tendai, because you are saying you were working at another firm, you moved to another firm. It's always my dream to think, okay, maybe what stuck looks like, it's like I'm not going anywhere, I'm remaining at the same position, but it's actually shocking to hear that you move from point A to point B, but still you feel stuck. Like, to be honest, I thought being stuck is being at the same position. Like, can you explain more, like what does stuck really feels like? Because now I'm scared. I'm also one of the person who is thinking maybe if I get another job or maybe if I get promoted, like my stuck is going to end. But from your story, it doesn't sound like that because you're stuck even growing.
That is true. Because a lot of the times we think stuck means being in the same place. You can actually transfer your problems to a different postcode. So being stuck is where you have no strategies that work in the environment you are in. What was striking in my story was that I never analyzed why I was where I was, what was making me feel stuck. And when you are in fight or flight mode, it clouds judgment. And having to employ any strategies at that point, it's often not from a point of a nervous system that is guarded. You are just running. The key thing would have been to sit down, even way before my frustration had accumulated, to then look and think of what organization would I actually want to be in, what environment would actually work for me before the crisis came. Because when the frustration was there, I just wanted to run to anywhere. So the key thing is, first, if you can start to look into your job and how you feel before it has escalated, and then you even start to think rationally about your next step, and also running without an analysis of what is making you feel stuck in the current place will lead you repeating the same pattern in a different place.
You've even answered my question because I was about to ask to say, so what then changed for you to then realize, no, I don't need to be stuck again in the third role that I'm going into. And then you said you had to think rationally. And then you had to do the analysis because sometimes you can actually go and just transfer the problems and you feel like there were times actually personally for me that I felt like, I think this was a bad decision. Like as long as I just get a job back home, I'm gonna take this. But now I'm realizing, no, sometimes we don't need to work like out of emotions. We actually need to realize before we make the second move. So maybe,
yeah. Yes, like you were saying, it's an issue of the strategies that work in the environment that you are in. There is a reason why every company you go to has an onboarding process, even though you are a CA there and you're a CA again in that space. It's also studying the terrain to see what works in this environment, what is applauded, what is considered good in this space, so that you can be able to find a strategy that works. A lot of us work with a copy-paste strategy. So what worked in one environment, we think we're just going to apply it in the same. That doesn't work. So having to look into this space that I'm in, even the type of roles that you're in. You'll be surprised when I got into that role where I got the referral interview, I discovered that I was not so much a numbers person, but more towards the risk. So sometimes it's not even a change of the environment. It can be you and your self-awareness to see, I tend to struggle in these types of roles. Could it be when I did that project on secondment, I seemed to feel a lot better? Could I be leaning more towards that one as opposed to just going and going and going without having an analysis of what is it that's affecting me?
Okay. Thank you so much. I think most of us, we can relate to what Tendai is saying, because I think there's also like a danger of sometimes moving from one position without really thinking and going to the other, applying the same method and strategy and finding yourself unfulfilled still. So what are some of the beliefs that actually you see in people that sort of like keep people being stuck, that like they don't recognize it? Like, what are some of the things that we do as people that makes us not to have that self-awareness that, you know what, I actually need to think, I need to analyze my current situation. Why is it that we don't think about that, but then we just think about, oh, I just need to move away?
Yes. There's a fine line between comfort and routine and a state where a word called anhedonia. So anhedonia is a state where you've grown numb to your surroundings. You are not wallowing in depression, but you have this numbness that has grown in you from accepting things that are really disturbing your nervous system. So for example, someone is in a job where they feel, I feel just dead inside. But you think it's okay, I can just keep going and going. You can actually teach your body and your nervous system to be numb. And that numbness transcends even to things like your home life, even some certain cynicism. There's certain people, you greet them, the negativity even just oozes out. They're just hopeless, like, yeah, we're just going through life. There is a myth that I'll just over time I would just learn to love it. I would just end up, happier somehow. It does not happen by osmosis or by breathing. You have to actually apply strategies. The getting help that we now talk about is, if you are not able even to self-study, find someone who can help you, because it does not just wish itself away. So that word anhedonia, it's a numbness towards life, towards things. You are not necessarily crumbling, but you become like a walking zombie. And then there's something I call the 11-11 gap. So the 11-11 gap is when there's an 11 a.m. you that shows up when they are okay and they want to show the world that I'm happy, good morning, you're all right. And then there's 11 p.m. that is behind closed doors. That is you in your home. If you start to see that gap of the 11-11s widening, where your temperament is just too varied, because here you are controlled because you're seen. But you notice even a child is just being a child in the home. They ask you a question. There's an answer that you give with so much wrath that even yourself, you're shocked where all that came from. It is that internalized frustration. When you start to see that temperament gap widening, that's a sign. And it even shows up even in your body. You start to have aches and pains for some people, because we've been sold an idea that for you to be in a bad place, you need to be visibly crumbling. You can functionally and visibly look okay, but your body normally tells you when things are not all right. You end up not having Sunday scaries. For you, you have weekly scaries. You know, we have that Sunday feeling of, oh, it's Monday. For you, it's every day, every moment. Every Teams message kind of startles you. Every time someone puts something in your calendar, you're worried because you're sitting on edge. Your nervous system is not at rest. Those are not normal things. You are not meant to feel like that. Have a bad day, have a bad week. That's okay. But when you internalize it as this is just your life, working in the UK, US, Zimbabwe, that is not a normal state for a person to be perpetually going in. That's a sign that something is stuck somewhere in there. So, yes, I hope that gives some sort of view of what it is that someone feels when they're in that stuck state.
Yeah, and it's very relatable, I think, because sometimes we tend to think that is going to be very visible, but sometimes it's so invisible, like you're saying. Like I was checking the answers that you even give other people close to you, like the ache pain. You are just scared about waking up. Even a Teams message like just scares you. Like it's yeah. Thank you for that, Tendai. And then maybe in your case, what was the mindset shift for you? Was it someone helping you to recognize that you are stuck? Like you say that sometimes you you might not actually recognize it, and then you might need someone to help you to get out of it. So in your case, was it someone helping you to see that other side? How was the mindset shift from your journey?
So I think it was a combination of some self-awareness when I started to really analyze and check that I'm always going to our friendship groups with these certain types of problems. It's just dressed differently, but it's always, these people, all this. And I started to see the pattern. That also gave me a hint. And I actually sought a coach. So I actively am engaged in counseling myself, maybe not as frequent, but it helps me sometimes to stand outside of being in the situation and being able to analyze and look into things. So I've had that self-awareness and then getting a coach. And one thing I've been able to also do is realizing that my work life does not have to be my entire identity. The reason why we struggle, a lot of us, is there's nothing else outside of being assistant manager. So when assistant manager, it's an example, assistant manager is not working, the whole system crumbles. Try and find where you can bring parts of you to make a whole you. Find sports, be in community, be with family, join other things so that you are not a person where if this area is down, you feel like your whole system, because a lot of us are afraid to ask for help because it's as if you're saying Tendai is defective. But it's just that Tendai is having struggles with this area, but Tendai is fine. So it's that issue of that identity shift. You are not your job. The job is one aspect of you. Yes.
Thank you so much, Tentai, for that. So something that I picked from what you were saying is getting stuck wasn't actually the biggest challenge, but the bigger challenge was actually recognizing it, because it took you to come to go from a job to another job, and then realizing that you were actually stuck. And actually stuck doesn't always look very visible. So, and it's also like an emotional one. So now we just want to move to the next stage. But maybe before we move to the next stage, I just want us again to try and have an icebreaker, because one of the things that we picked from what Tendai Anna was saying, is that she actually sought help, right? So if I was to ask people who are here, if asking for help had a flavor, what would be yours today? Would it be spicy? Would it be vanilla? Would it be lemon? Would it be chocolate? What would it be if asking help had a flavor? So you can type in chat, lemon, okay. Feels a bit uncomfortable, mixed feelings, vanilla, comfortable, lemon, vanilla, lemon. Yeah, keep them coming. Keep them coming. So what's actually fascinating from the answers that we are getting, I think I saw a lot of lemon, vanilla. I haven't seen like chocolate. Any chocolate, guys? Okay, that's fine. So what's actually fascinating is that asking for help isn't that purely practical, and sometimes it's not in us. Sometimes we find it very difficult to actually ask for help, and there are reasons to that. So we're gonna put a poll so that we can try and explore the reasons. Why is it that the flavor is lemon and mostly vanilla for other people? So what usually stops you guys from asking? For myself, I would say I'm not really sure what I want to ask because I don't recognize that I need help. Because for me, it's having maybe the visible things, because maybe I'm not visually seeing the signs. I'm not really sure like what I need to ask for. How about you guys? What's usually stops you from asking for help? So can we see the results? Sam, Beta, are you able to show the results?
Can you see my screen?
Oh, now I can see. Okay. Yes, you can
Okay,
share.
let
Now
me
we can
share
see.
again. Sorry, give me a minute and I'll bring it back on.
56% says I'm not sure what to ask. The good thing is, what's powerful about these results is that most of the barriers that we are seeing here, they are not technical barriers. They're just human barriers, right? And that being said, we are going to enter into a segment, and I'm going to bring in Tendai Bwanya to help us how best we can get help. So Tendai, if I was to ask you from a practical experience, from your journey, how did you find asking help in your own journey? And then what did you actually do? Who did you identify, and how did you identify that this is the right person? And when and how was the journey? If you can take us through that experience in your journey.
Thanks, Brenda. That's many questions there. But first, I just want to acknowledge what Tendai Anna said. There was a lot of God there for somebody who was listening. And if you are taking notes, maybe please revisit them because there were a lot of points that she mentioned, which I even jotted down myself here, because it's important to begin to recognize when you are actually stuck. So thanks, Tendai, for that. Now, Brenda, on to your many questions. I think when it comes to asking for help, now, generally, I don't hesitate to approach people, right? And certain things come naturally to other people, but they don't to others. But there's one thing that I always talk about: intentionality. And that applies whether you're an introvert, you're an extrovert. When you are intentional and you take time to pause, to reflect on where you are going and what's happening and why things are not working, it can then help. So I'm going to share a practical story, maybe the most recent one. I wasn't stuck as such, but it was about a decision. So I left the professional services firm 2013, and I was happy doing what I was doing. And I never planned to go back to professional services again. I was content. I was happy. I thought the firm has given me what I needed. And a few, almost a decade later, the professional services firm that I was working for previously called and said, would you want to come back to the firm? That was, if you think about something that you are not thinking, you are not planning for, it just comes and there it is in front of you. And many things happen like that in leadership. Sometimes you are just confronted with something that you were not expecting, curveballs, but it was a positive curveball, but still, I had not prepared for that. I was not thinking about that. I was not even looking for it. And I thought, what do I need? What do I do here? A minute after dropping that call, the first person I spoke to was my wife. And I said, this is, the thing that has come my way. What do you think? But then after that conversation, the next conversation was with somebody who had been my boss. And I'm going to be intentional with my numbers here. 20 years prior, somebody who had been my boss and was a partner in Deloitte, I spoke to them and I said, this is something that has come my way. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. What do you think about it? This is why I don't like it. This is why I think it might work. And they gave me a different perspective. They mentioned something that I had not been putting in my own analysis about how the role could help what I was planning to be doing, what I had on where I was going. And it was in that, it didn't make the decision easier. To be honest with you, it took me maybe 3 months to actually decide. 3 months of meeting people, chatting to people, asking questions, and then actually make a decision. But what happened in that conversation with the person whom I call a mentor, and it's not a formalized mentor word, and I will talk about that later, was that they gave me things to think about. They gave me things to probe on. So what I learned from that is when you are going into these conversations, you may not get the solution. You may not get the answer. Most of us love to get answers. Just tell me what to do. Should I take this? Should I not? And somebody says, take it. And then you take it, it doesn't work, and then you blame them. But usually when you go into conversations like this, people can help you with a framework, things to think about. What does it mean? Have you thought about this? Why would you not be interested? So I think what I learned from that was it's important when you are stuck or when you are making decisions to get a framework and own the decision. Let the decision be yours. Don't turn up and say, Brenda told me to do it. Engage with Brenda. Let her ask you questions. So my going back to the firm was significantly helped by this person who had experience. What was your other question? When, how, what? Have I left anything there?
So you've answered the who. You said you first approach your wife, and then
Yes.
later you approach your boss.
And I always do that, by the way, because she's the boss. That matters more than my mentors. If she's not happy with it, I can't go ahead with that.
Yes. So the other thing that I wanted to ask in terms of the who, how did you identify that your boss and your wife were the best people to talk to? Because I think
Okay.
sometimes it's so hard. Yes, you know what you want to ask and everything, but how do someone actually then go and say, okay, this is the right person that I need to go and ask?
Right. That's a very important question. I put it down to relationship. I think it's the relationship first before the stuff that we talk about. And when even we're talking about mentoring, and mentoring and coaching are different. But if it's mentoring, build the relationship first. Before the chaos, before the critical decisions, before things are, I need to do this. when you build the relationship, you naturally know where to go when certain things come. I have got 7 areas in my life that I think are important: fitness, my faith, my finances, my family, a number of areas. And for each of those areas, there are people that I speak to. Some cover 3 areas, some cover 2, some cover almost all of them. But as you relate with people before the fire comes, you end up naturally knowing where to go because you have already been having conversations with those people and you identify that this might be the best person actually to talk to about that. That's how, in this situation, I had to. That person is a personal friend, but also they happened to have been a partner at Deloitte. So that was like, this actually does make sense. So that's how I would say relationship first, before you begin to do the analysis of who to talk to. What is the relationship with them like, and how have you been relating with them all along?
Okay, I think we have actually also covered an important aspect, because sometimes in my mind, I think I can have like buy one and get 10 for free. But I heard you saying, so sometimes it's understanding different things, right? You talked about faith, you talked about finance, you said you have F's that you
Yes.
you
I couldn't
you
find one, but maybe I might use AI to find the 7th F. There are different ones, but yeah.
Okay, I think this is actually something very important that is worth emphasizing, because sometimes the reason why we struggle to find who to ask, because we think that person is going to be like buy one and get 10 for free. So whenever I want finance, I go to them. Whenever I want like this, I go to them. And maybe it might also then answer the reason why sometimes we find it hard. Like going back to the poll question, there was a question where I've tried it, but it never worked. Could it be that we are just trying to get all the answers from one person? And sometimes what we want, the other thing that you've covered in terms of what you said, you may not get the answer. In terms of what, sometimes what we need is a framework. And then we need to then go on that decisions and then make a move. And then in terms of when, I think I picked that you said you need to build the relationship before the fire comes.
Yeah.
Build the relationship so that even when the fire comes, you actually know, no, if I go to Tendai Anna, she's going to help me with the fitness. If I go to Sam, she's going to help me with fame, that kind of thing. That was very powerful. So that being said, we have heard about recognizing the need for help and finding the right support about who, when, what. One last thing that I wanted to ask you, Tendai, is what are some of the myths that people have when it comes to who, when, what, and how? I know you've already covered some of them, like when you're saying sometimes we are looking for the answers. Like do this or don't do this. But what are some of the myths or that stand for you when people are asking for help?
I think, I still hesitate to use these words like mentors, and a coaching relationship, for example, is a very formal relationship. When it comes to mentorship, I used this example a couple of years ago when I was actually on an ICAS event, and I said, I've had a number of people come to me and say, can you be my mentor? And the moment somebody says that, it scares me. To be honest, I begin to think, what's going on? Should I commit? Should I say yes? And what does it mean then? When I say yes, does it mean we're going to have meetings and now we're going to meet monthly? I have seen mentorship work best when it's a natural relationship in which you identify the areas that you benefit the most from the people that you have around you. So you are intentional and you say, this is where I want to go. Who has been there that I know? How can I learn from them? And when you meet with them, you simply want to learn. Be a learner and say, hey, you've been in this space. This is where I'm headed. I would want to learn from you. How did you do it? Without throwing the word, be my mentor, you will be surprised that many people want to actually help. Many people want to have a conversation. Sometimes the threat of formality and commitment actually scares people. Sometimes you need to just have one conversation And then it builds from there. You know, surprisingly, you might not even like them and they might not like you. And it's okay. And you can move on. So I think the moment you say, be my mentor is, you know, and then something doesn't happen, it's like when a girl turns you down. So it feels like a heartbreak. You just normalize it. Let it be a general, you know, a normal relationship. That's a myth for me, which I think people think these things have to be formalized. And if someone is my mentor, they have to know that they are my mentor. The second thing, you know, that I think people also put into this is a mentor has to be someone who has achieved amazing things. That may be, you know, I look up to them in every way. They've achieved amazing things. What I have learned is really some people that may not have achieved what we are aiming for have got wise words and wise perspectives of what they see. And I use the coaching relationship as an example. There are many coaches in sport that did not achieve the things that their people that they coach have achieved. But they had a certain angle or an insight into how they look at things. And this is where the interactions help when you are speaking to people. Because as you speak to them, you can then actually be able to identify and say, hey, Brenda has not been in this space. But every time I speak to her, the way she actually interacts with me and the questions she asks me are very helpful. So those are the two that I'll share. The number one, it doesn't have to be formalized day one and say, be my mentor, you are now my mentor. So how are we going to meet? The second thing, don't always think they have to have been, you know, where you are, you know, aiming to be. They could just have a perspective and they might be a very good person in guiding you towards that. There are many people that are executive coaches today that have not been really executives themselves, but they have learned the art of drilling out or pulling out gold from people, and they can do it very well.
Thank you so much, Tendai. And that's very relatable. And now to think about it, that we have teachers that have taught us, that have taught like doctors, but they themselves, they are not doctors. But for some reasons, when we become professional, we want to look for big answers when we can actually find answers in the people that are around our circles. And sometimes I also feel guilty of, I once sent a message to someone when I was back home and I said, can you be my mentor? And then that was it. And I was thinking maybe they're gonna call me and say, let's meet, like this is what you need to do. But now I'm seeing that it's about building relationships with the people before we actually then say, be my mentor.
Yeah. Can I give you a practical recommendation? If you identify someone you have not been in touch with at all, and you want them to be, you think they are somebody that could be your mentor. When you reach out to them first time, just tell them what you are trying to achieve and say, maybe we can have a chat. And without even committing that there will be multiple others, just a chat. It won't scare them and you can have a conversation and then maybe you can ask for the next one or you can see whether it works.
Okay. Yeah. That's actually very powerful. And trying to tell people what you're actually trying to achieve goes back to the self-awareness. Because if you don't know, because you're just maybe working on an autopilot, like just having the strategy copy paste, it also then goes back to what Tendai Anna covered earlier on. So thank you so much. This then brings us to into the next sessions. So behind every lesson, there's always a story. So in the next session, I'm going to ask Jennifer, in 5 minutes, Jennifer, can you share your story? How asking for help has changed your career into seeing things maybe that you would not have seen if you had not asked for help. Or maybe you were going to see it, but maybe it was going to take you longer than it ended up taking you.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks, Tendai, for your earlier insights. I'm really enjoying the discussion. So my success story is about how valuable coaching has helped me on my professional growth. So a few years back, I think in ICA's group, there was sort of coaching sessions that were happening. So Tendai, who's the one we were just talking to, Tendai Boanya, sort of offered to do some career growth sessions with a group of individuals who were up for it. So I sort of signed up for it, and we had coaching sessions. And the interesting thing is that I messaged him a few months ago just saying, thank you, Tendai, for the insights that you shared with me, because I have been able to apply them. So recently I have been promoted, and looking back, I can see that the promotion wasn't just the technical or the hard work. It was the results of lessons I learned through coaching. I think one of the biggest takeaways from my coaching sessions was the importance of being intentional about my career and not shying away from conversations about progression. I think for a long time, I assumed that if I worked hard, delivered results, opportunity would naturally just, come. And coaching has challenged me that thinking in terms of it's not just the hard work, which is good, but having an open career conversations with your manager or your boss is really helpful. Because for me, when I first raised the topic of promotion, the answer was no. I was told there was no business case. And whilst it was disappointing, I think coaching taught me that the conversation itself is very important, because I was able to really articulate my aspirations and what I wanted, and just to put myself on the radar for opportunities. And a few months later, my manager was then promoted to head of internal auditor, and he actually approached me and said, you know what, I want to put you forward for promotion, because he knew that this is something that I had sort of, shared with him, these aspirations. And I realized that actually the initial conversations, even though it was a no, it actually planted a seed. And I honestly don't think that if I didn't have that conversation, I would have been promoted. I think they're just going to say, oh, she's fine. She seems happy. So having that conversation really helped. And I think had I not received the coaching, I don't think I would have sort of gotten the conversation to even initiate a promotion discussion in the first place. I probably would have continued working hard, hoping I'll get noticed, or even started looking elsewhere. But I think the key lesson was more of advocating yourself is not arrogance. So there's nothing wrong with actually saying, you know what, let's have a conversation about this is where I want to go. And, just having that career discussion with your manager. And I think initially I felt like, oh, you know what, the moment I have that conversation and they say no, I've sort of exposed myself, but I've realized that actually, you know what, it's a very powerful tool just to have that conversation and plant that seed, because next time that opportunity comes, they're going to remember that actually this person expressed this and this person wants to grow. So, and even sometimes if it's a no, a never, and not yet, I think the conversation, it creates awareness, it opens doors, and it just sort of positions you for future opportunities. So that was really my key takeaway in that when I had those coaching sessions with Tendai, and many other things that, Tendai sort of talked about. Intentionality, not just work-wise, but even with family, even with friends. Like, I think Tendai is sort of well-rounded, because when we sort of had coaching with him, it wasn't just centered about work. It was a lot of other aspects, character, discipline, just being a good person, because those are all the things that sort of filter into you, because you also need to be a good person. You need to be a kind person. You never know who is going to sponsor you for that promotion, who's going to say, actually, I agree, Jennifer should be put forward for a promotion. So yeah, that's my success story. And thanks to
Thank
Tendai
you.
again.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for making it real that one of the things that we actually are looking forward to achieve, they're just a conversation away. And sometimes it's even the conversation with the people that we are working with. It's even the conversation with those people who can guide us. But we need those conversations. We need those conversations. I think one of the things that I'm learning from your story, Jennifer, is that we need to be very intentional, and we need to start to talk to people. We need to have those conversations. It's not just being there, like just being behind the scenes. And thank you so much for that. One of the things that I'm going to ask you, Tendai and Tendai Anna, and then Tendai Rukara, is that looking back, what do you have some of the things that you wish you had done earlier in your career in terms of asking for help? Like as you look back now and say, on this point, I think I should have asked for help earlier. I should have talked to people. I can say, Tendai Anna, do you want to go first?
Yes, so I think one thing I wish I had done earlier was to look beyond my immediate team. One of the things that we tend to do is we silo ourselves in. You go into audit, for example, you may have a core area. Sometimes you're actually segmented per sector. The relationships are good to foster within your immediate team, but also make sure you make it wider. Making it wider also allows you to develop other skills beyond just your working paper. Because when you're speaking with your immediate team, it's quite easy to translate, you've managed to complete this report. But when you go beyond your team, you're actually having to foster your communication skills, that ability to translate what value you bring even to the organization. It's a practice form. And it even allows you, for example, if something is not working in your current setup, you are able to translate your relationships in other teams to then foster something else. Because a lot of the times we are just working in our silo, and then, like Tendai was saying, we don't have any warm connections around us. Then all of a sudden it's, hi, I'm so and so, I've been here for 3 years, but this and that, it becomes such a front load. So learning to say, earlier in your career, look beyond your immediate team. And a practical way to do that is we've got networks, for example. For example, there's a well-being network that pulls people from different areas. Join into that. There's activities for work. Go and be a part of that. It's a way in which you have a common goal, but you get to speak to someone, because sometimes at the coffee machine, it's a little awkward to just say, hi, you're from this department. But when you go into a particular project, your shared vision, shared goal, it's easier to then, again, like Tendai said, first start off with the conversation. The next time it then grows into something else without always being the person who now comes when they're in a crisis and they need an answer to move from there to there. But when you're sharing those goals, it opens up discussions. I got into speaking because I spoke to a lady at an event that one day I want to be on that stage. And she said, do you really? And then she connected me to my speaking coach. So it's in those spaces, events, go out and be not just about your core work team. So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you so much, Tendai. Thank you so much. Yeah, sometimes we like to be comfortable. The people that I started with, the people that I've worked with, like just being comfortable, like we don't want to look beyond the teams that are just close to us. And sometimes we come and we don't think beyond, we don't attend activities. There are so many things that ICAs do, even back home, even this side, like we literally don't attend some of those things. And thank you for making it clear that we need to look beyond our immediate teams. We need to make it wider. We need to have warm connections with people. And then we need to build a network as well. And then Tendai Bwanya, do you have anything to share that when you look back, you wish you had done earlier in your career?
Yeah, maybe I'll share a couple of things. There are things that I've done maybe in the past 15 years in my career that I could have done earlier. And one of them is, I couldn't find a better word, but to be explicit, to say what you mean and mean what you say. When you turn up and you're talking about that promotion that maybe Jennifer was talking about, not to assume that your boss will think you are interested, to really make it very plain and say, hey, I'm a senior manager right now. I would want to be a director in the next round. And then turn it actually to them to say, I want you to support me and help me to actually know what I need to do to get there, because that's their job. So you become very clear in what you say and what you are aspiring for and how you would need their help. It's something that usually you just assume. When I was in the firm and I was maybe an assistant manager, I was just assuming everyone wants me to develop. Everyone wants me to be promoted to the next level. I'll just work hard. When I do the right job, they will then talk about that. But I learned later that in leadership, even the willingness to lead is a quality needed for leadership. So expressing your willingness to progress gets you some marks towards that progress. So that's the first thing that I would actually say. The second thing I would say is playing to my strengths. Now, sometimes it can be tricky. You just try to do what's put in front of you. But when you know what you are good at, be very bold or courageous enough to carve your own path. I've had a bit of an unconventional career path where I've done things that sometimes people ask me, why are you leading an operations team? You should be in finance. You are an accountant. You are an auditor. It's an easy role to take in finance than to go and be leading an operations team in investment management. But what I realized is know what you are good at. I tell a story where I say I used to print out my feedback and lay it in front of me, at home and try to see what is every person saying and what do I do with what they are saying. But it's not enough to just do that, but it's important to then be courageous enough and say, where can I excel? So I want to encourage anyone on this platform to say, if you are early in your career, know what you are good at and play to those strengths. One example is at times you are not changing your role. You can simply be, when it comes to client meetings, I'm the numbers guy. When everyone is talking about other things and it comes to that section where we need to get to the numbers, I want to be doing that. Or when it comes to the presentation and we are talking about things, that's what I want to do, so that you are more and more doing what you are very good at. Always mitigating the things that could bring it down, but play to your strengths and ask for those opportunities rather than feel like I have to do everything. Tell your boss, tell your manager, I want to be the guy presenting. When we do this, can I be the person doing the numbers? Or when we are doing this, can I be the one doing this? So that's one of the things that I wish I had done in my career, just to play more to my strengths.
Thank you so much, Tendai. Yeah, for making it that clear that sometimes we need to be explicit with what we want, not try and assume that someone knows what I want. I think, yeah, that's very, very important, because I think maybe sometimes the people that we are thinking they know what we want, they are also busy with their own life. And we should also maximize our strengths. That's very, very important. Now that we have heard from some powerful stories, I want to open to the floor to ask questions, because it was me just asking questions and I might have missed some of the questions that the floor actually had. So I'm opening this time to the floor to ask questions. Because of our time, we are not going to be able to exhaust all the questions. But what I'm going to do is I'll take the first 5 questions and then post them to Tendai and Tendai. The first 5 questions, those are the ones that we are going to take. So Sam, do we have any questions in our Q&A?
No, not yet. I've just reminded people to use the Q&A to raise any questions. But if anybody's got a question on the call, please put your hand up, raise your hand, because we can also do it directly.
Yeah, you can also raise your hand or unmute yourself. And then we'll take the first 5 questions. If you guys don't have questions, I'll ask my only question.
So I can ask a question. I was going to type it. So this session is about coaching and the benefits of coaching, and is talking about from stuck to strong. Okay, Deborah has put her hand up, so I'm going to just do it as a quick one. Do we need to wait for things to go wrong to engage a coach, or can it be something I can regularly have as a way of almost, like how accounts get done every year and reset and budget and forecast? That's a question.
You want to go ahead?
Tendai, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I
Yes.
saw.
Yes. I would say you are better off proactively having a coach. If you remember from my story, when you are now in a scenario, your adrenaline kicks in, and oftentimes that adrenaline clouds judgment. You are highly likely to just run into anything and from anything. So when you proactively have a coach, it allows you to have some pre-steps or even like frameworks, as Tendai was saying. You already have frameworks that guide your way of processing in the context that you now find yourself in. The beauty of frameworks are they are principles. They are not absolute. So principles, you're able to say, even if you were in Zimbabwe, even if you're in the UK, even if you're in the US, they give you a pathway and parameters along which to flow through, so that when you now get into a crisis, you now know how to activate. And the beauty of frameworks are they signal your amber. So we're not waiting for red. We start to see that these are some of the things that are leading to this, which allows you to even plan your next move, whether it's planning your exit or planning a change of strategy, or even knowing that this conversation at this level is now imminent. So I would say proactively have a coach. It helps you then deal with crises as they come. But yes, so I think that's my answer. And now you might have something else.
Can I just jump in quickly there? There's a book about the All Blacks, and it mentions this thing about changing your game when you're on top of your game. I have actually realized that when you seek coaches in crisis, you miss opportunities to actually grow, because sometimes the best opportunities to grow do not come in a crisis. I left promotions behind for the next opportunity, and I've never regretted that. And if you are not getting the support or the help that you need, you could actually think, I'm doing pretty well, because you just don't realize you could be even doing better. So I would say, don't look at coaching as something that I'm struggling, therefore I need coaching. Think of it as, if I am even doing this better and this well without a coach, how much more could I be doing if I had one? That's how I would actually challenge you. So don't wait for a crisis. You could actually be doing maybe better than you are doing.
Thank you. Brenda, we've got somebody who's got their hand up, and we've got a question in the chat.
Yeah, so we'll start with Deborah. Deborah, you can unmute yourself and then you can ask your question.
Thanks, Brenda. I realized my question, I think, was already answered in the previous discussion, but it was mainly around, I noted one of the most important points raised here around being intentional about your career, about, what you want to achieve and your goals. And I just wanted to then get sort of nuggets or best practices in terms of like staying focused towards your personal growth, especially when you're faced with setbacks and disappointments, where sometimes you feel like you don't want to keep pushing. So yeah, I just wanted to get more clarity in terms of how do you sort of keep, the ball rolling? How do you keep on moving intentionally when faced with setbacks? Thank you.
Yes, Tendai Bwanya, do you want to take this, or Tendai Anna?
Yeah, I think it might be a broad question, but I'll give you some practical tips. Every week, put 15 minutes in your calendar at least, and ask yourself, where am I coming from? Where am I going? How do I feel about where I am? And what am I going to do about it? The number one thing that I've seen that actually changes things is action. We can turn up on this webinar, get all the information, and information these days is not difficult to get. You can use AI, you can get things, but the number one thing that changes actual things is action. So if you put 15 minutes in your calendar and you respect it as if you are meeting with your boss, and you have a set of questions that you ask yourself, how has been the past week? Where am I going? Where am I coming from? What is it that I'm not enjoying at the moment? What am I going to do about it? And you follow through. You'll be surprised the results you will have at the end of the year.
Thank you, Tendai. And then there's also a question to say, can you confirm if the book you mentioned is Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best by Alan Stein Jr.?
I think it might be different, but it sounds like the one, but I'll check and confirm.
Thank you. And then we have another question here from the chat. It says, I would like to hear some practical tips for fighting anhedonia. And I don't know what that is, but I was trying to check on Copilot. It says, is the inability or reduced ability to feel pleasure or enjoyment from things that normally make you happy? Did you get the question? Should I read it again?
No, it's fine. I think I spoke about anhedonia when I spoke in my segment about that numbness to life and things. So the first thing I always say, if you can't name it, you can't tame it. So first, that identification, that exercise that Tendai was speaking about, the 15 minutes, that is very critical because it's in those moments where you really look at yourself and your life without trying to sort of sugarcoat it for anyone, to say, I have come to a state where I've just become cynical. I've lost that zeal for life. And so the steps that would help is trying to remember the moments that you felt excitement. I can give a practical example. When I was back home in Zimbabwe, I would be called upon to present stuff. And that came naturally, like I would just flow into it. It never was a specific job or a title, but I could see how I was able to roll into go into the role, plan for it without so much of pushing. That meant that it was something that I felt joy from. Trying to remember and reconnect with those moments and activities. There are times you can actually find that you can plug it into your work. So for me now, I realize I've become a speaker. I decided to use that gift even within my own workplace, to be hired by my own 9 to 5 to do what I also do on the side. So it's finding those things that you bring back that fire and that energy so that you can now find places to plug them in. You know, Tendai was talking about the Fs. You can find ways in which you can plug them into all those areas so that you bring back that zeal. If you allow me, Brenda, there's a flamingo analogy that is often spoken about. Flamingos are born white or gray. They are not born with that vibrant color that they have. But what gives them the color is the food that they ingest. So the flamingo you see that looks like it is standing and it is just flamboyant and very bright. It is coming from what it ingests. It's the same thing with us sometimes. When you see the color in you is fading, what can you ingest in? What books can you read? What events can you go to? What different circles can you be in? There are some circles where if you speak development, the conversation dies. That may indicate, find some circles that bring life. There are people you speak to. So it's almost like that flamingo, that anhedonia is like that dying of that color. So you want to find things that inject back that fire. Being a corporate in the 9 to 5 does not mean that our lives should just be dull and full of offices. You can find ways to inject some of those things into our work lives. Because when you are in a nervous system that is settled, only then can we now start to think practical strategies and see the next step. Okay. I'll be quiet, Brenda, before you tell me my time's up. But I hope that helps with how to get over that anhedonia.
Thank you so much, Tentai, for that response. And then I think it also goes back to what you said, like when you first discussed about recognizing that you're stuck, that sometimes it's not visible. And it might be sometimes those things that are also telling you something, like you're saying. So we have a few questions in our Q&A. Let me check. Okay, so we only have 3 questions in our Q&A, and those will be our last questions. So this one says, on coaching, in your view, does a good coach primarily ask questions to help people find their own answers, or should a good coach also provide advice and solutions when appropriate? I feel that my coach only asks me, as he says, I have the solutions.
So maybe I could jump in on that one.
Yes.
I could jump in on that one, Brenda. There's a distinction between a mentor and a coach. A mentor can talk to you about, because ideally a mentor is someone who has been there. and usually he has walked the path, and you are looking up to them so they can tell you their story and how they got there, so they can have some advice. A coach is different. They don't need to have been there. The coaching skill is actually bringing out from you the best. So what they do is they don't play the game for you. I don't think you have seen any coaches in sport that actually will be playing. They don't. But what happens is when they are coaching, they will ask you the question. So I'll give you an example. If you are in a coaching session, somebody asks you, what is your next goal? What are you aiming for? I don't change what you are aiming for. I begin to ask the question, why are you aiming for that? What does it mean to you? So it's really helping you identify what's driving you. And if you say your family is important, why then, how do you think this decision aligns with that? So I would say good coaching is built on helping you connect things in a wholesome manner, your values, the things that you think matter to you, the things you are aiming for, not necessarily to tell you what to do. They can help you to find the answers, but not necessarily tell you what to do. That's how coaching is different. There's something that was mentioned by Jennifer that I want to come back to, that people don't like sometimes when it comes to coaching. Somebody will come and say, I want to be promoted to director or to partner or to senior manager. When you begin coaching, you then begin to dig into what matters to them. And then they tell you, my family matters. And then they tell you they've got a 6-month-old baby. And then you ask the question, what impact is that decision going to have? Some people don't want to talk about that. They are like, no, just tell me how to get from senior manager to director. Coaching is awesome. It's about you as a person. Back to what Tendai Rukarwa was saying. If you are just thinking about fixing this one aspect of your life, you could be actually pulling it down with the other area of your life. So I usually turn up, in sessions with people and I say, if you're only looking for success in one area of your life and that's all you want to hear, you're speaking to the wrong person. Because for me, success has to be wholesome. I don't want you to build your career whilst you're destroying your family.
Mm.
That doesn't sound like success to me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Tendai, for that clarity to say that sometimes the coach, actually, all the coach we've been watching FIFA, we've never seen them on the ground. That's actually a good analogy as well. Tendai Anna, I'm going to give you this question. It's a bit long. How do you deal with the fact that being good at your job often leads to a heavier workload, more complex responsibilities? Why does working diligently sometimes feel like it results in being given even more difficult work? How can someone maintain high performance without becoming overwhelmed by increasing expectations?
Okay. I would like to start off with a theory called the PIE theory, P-I-E, PIE theory by Harvey Colben. So it states that for your elevation in your career, you need the 3 PIE. P is performance, that accounts for 10% of your elevation. There comes a point where good, better, best, it was all capped at 10% in order to move you to the next level. Then there is I, that is your image, how people experience you, how people view you. That accounts for 30%. And then we have the E, that is exposure. Exposure is now the big lion's share, and that accounts for 60%. When a manager is thinking of your work and your tasks, like Tendai said, don't assume that because you're doing it well, why are they going to move you to another level? It's working for them. It then falls upon you to remember this pie analogy, to know that doing good work, whilst it accounts for something, it is not enough to move you to the next level. It is only a portion of your elevation. It's 10% of your pie. So it now becomes upon you to then have a conversation with your manager, or for you to even look within the organization, other places where you can start to channel your energy beyond just the work. Because for a manager, if the work is getting done to a good degree, why would they shift you? So they will keep on letting you be there, but it becomes your responsibility as well, even if it means that you are looking for a mentor within the organization, a coach or a sponsor. I specifically benefited from a sponsor. I know we're talking about coaches and mentors. A sponsor is I identified someone within the executive group that had some visibility towards my work. And I had a conversation with him to say, I want to work on my imagery and I want to work on my exposure. If any of you had ever known me, my LinkedIn was not always popping as it was. It was because there was an intentional step to then position myself beyond the working papers. We cannot elevate you if there's nothing to hold on to beyond your intention, just your intention. So sometimes you now need to start showing up and speaking strategically. You need to start showing up in areas where you need to deploy more than just the working paper, because you are a person who, remember that PIE, P-I-E. Your performance is good. It gets us through the door. It gets your CV to go through the process. The next few steps, unfortunately, unless you have a manager who's so concerned about people's development, they fall upon you to then start positioning yourself in a way that people see you in just more than the doer. They start to see the thinker side of you. So you might add some thoughts, or you might start positioning and showing us that whilst this is a group project, truly speaking, I coordinated it. I call it the humble brag. The humble brag is where you sprinkle that information that you are a coordinator. You say, we're so glad our team did this and this. Something that came to mind as I was putting together. You are letting us know that you put it together because you want to elevate your image from just being a doer. Because people sometimes cannot move us to a next level because there isn't a demonstration of that elevation of that level. So remember that PI theory, even as you're going through, to say your performance and your work, that is baseline. Those are hygiene factors. If you falter that, it becomes a faulty foundation for the others. But from this question, it looks like we've mastered that performance. Now let's work on the I and the E.
Thank you so much, Tendai. I've learned a lot of theories today. There's the pi, there's the 11 to 11, there's the flamingo in jazz. So many things that I've learned today. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. We are left with 2 minutes. So what I would do is, Tendai, is there any pressing question? Sorry, Sam, is there any pressing questions in the Q&A or in the chat, or we can just repeat up?
I think what we can do now is give space for Tendai and Tendai to talk about how we can reach out, link back. They've got platforms and ways for us to reach out for coaching. And I don't think 1.5 hours is enough to even start covering some of the key things. So if we let them talk a bit more about the services they offer, because I think so. I know I promised I wasn't going to talk a lot, but I've been in coaching regularly since 2016. It's only now that I don't regularly do it, but it's because now I'm using part of that. And I've been in coaching. I've also been in counseling for mental health. And what you do is you're given, as Tendai mentions, frameworks that help you cope and help you be better. The things I can handle today, if you'd given them to me 10 years ago, I would have fallen apart. This is the beauty of coaching. And this is the beauty of somebody coming and walking beside you and doing the stuff. So, and working in the UK, there is a space for sometimes people who can understand what the navigation of coming from Zimbabwe to here and the challenges that we face here that are different to what we faced back home. So I think this is a time to give Tendai time to talk about the services they offer, because I think they're valuable, especially when we talk about being intentional and having to challenge some of our beliefs. over to you, Tendai.
Thank you. I'll go first because the slide on the screen is mine, but I'll take maybe about 30 seconds. The best way to connect with me is LinkedIn. If you just want to chat, you can chat with me on LinkedIn, or you can use my Calendly and look for 30 minutes that actually suit you, and we can talk about that. I post as well on LinkedIn a few things. I've got a WhatsApp group that has got about 53 or so chartered accountants that I can provide you information on if you want to join as well, because I do post a few things there. And then the last thing and then I want to mention that I actually have I've done a lot of work since 2021, where I actually built a 3-part group coaching program. And then I've also now designed a 3-part coaching for senior professionals, which is career clarity, leadership impact, and then the other one, which is like for the C-suite or partner promotion. But before I finish, I want to confirm that the book I mentioned is called Legacy: What the All Blacks Can Teach Us About the Business of Life, and it's by James Kerr, Kerr. So if you look for that one, Legacy. That's it. Over to you, Tendai Rukarwa.
Sam, can you go on the slide before this one, like slide 13? Scroll down. Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, Tendai Anna, you can go
Thank
ahead.
you. Yes, so I am very active on LinkedIn. I am found as Tendai Anna on I think all the social media platforms. I am Tendai Anna, and I also have the Penguin Speaker page. That is where I also share insights. And then every month I host a monthly ladies meeting called the Penguin Village. So this is a meet up for people not confined to accountants. It's for women that are in roles where they can come and learn strategies on how to show up better and just be met at the core so that they can show up for their role. So I host those every month in person in Milton Keynes. We're still working on getting them virtual. But yes, connect with me, LinkedIn, and my Linktree is also available if you can see some of my previous interviews or any masterclasses I've had to share. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. So we have learned a lot today. We've learned about how we can recognize that we are stuck, how we can accelerate growth, how we can talk about support, mentorship, coaching, but information alone doesn't create change. So one of the things that I will encourage ourselves, myself included, is let's go and do the action. So action is the only thing that is going to change, like what the presenter said, that there's a lot of information out there, but as long as we don't act on it, we are not going to see any results. So let's go and reflect. Let's go and do action. Over to you, Sam. Do we have any other announcements, Sam, that we need to say as we can? Or any next event?
No, we are planning our next event, but as you know, while we might not have regular events, the events are always insightful and relevant. And so watch this space for the next event. And we do a mix of events for weekend members only and some like this one, which we extend to ICAS as well. I think what would be helpful if anybody on this call has got time is to just give some feedback on what you found interesting and any other topics that you'd like us to cover as well. I think in general, Tendai and Tendai are brilliant, and what they're doing is brilliant. And we know that there is, for us, this session was born out of realizing that when coming across and navigating, there is a space somewhere where we need to now start sharing some of those experiences so we're not all learning from scratch. We haven't been particularly good about it, but we're trying to do better. And the doing better is about sharing those lessons. And we've got such brilliant advocates. I mean, every time I talk to Tendai and Tendai, whether here or outside this forum, there's never enough time. and there's never enough, there's so much we can learn, there's so much we can benefit from and leverage from those that have gone on the path before us. But in terms of next steps, just keep watching this space. We will continue bringing more interesting topics to the forum. And a huge thank you to everybody who attended. And also a huge thank you to Bertha for arranging. It's the first time we've had an ICAS webinar hosted call. So I know we had a couple of teething issues, but I'd like to say a huge thank you for getting that done. And a huge thank you to our hosts. Huge thank you to Brenda as always. She's become the key person for our webinars and asking questions that we want to ask. So huge thank you to everybody on the panel and the attendees. On that note, we'll release everybody, and still with a huge thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everyone. Bye. Yes, people are just leaving. I'm just going to read what Tinashe just posted, but feel free to leave. Tinashe said, I'm an innovation and electrical engineer and was pointed to this conversation by my accountant sister Violet. It's fascinating how the wisdom around shifting from being stuck to become strong translate professions and life situations. Thank you, Tendai ×2. The 11 and 11 behavior check really resonated with me. It's also a reminder that I need to intentionally practice and model it with my year 4 and year 6 children. One additional thought on mentorship: while we often encourage people to seek mentors and become mentees, perhaps more of us should also be asking how we can step up and become mentors ourselves. All I'm trying to say is thank you, guys. Cheers. Thank you, Tinashe. Bye, everyone.